Western, Arab, slave trades versus African, pure masculine spirit, Sun martial artists, captives, who are referred to as slaves. They don't make the distinction between true honor and honor, as defined by them, true slavery and slavery, etc. Should good men, the wisest, with no ill-gotten gains, no privilege, no sabotage of others, to be seen as such, mind you, suffer with the most innocent, so wicked illusionist, fraudulent con artists, sex cult lunatics, and other villains have the unwarranted, unfair, far-reaching freedoms they need to abuse good people? If women refuse to make a move against them, if not a single suitable helper for the top martial artist who has over 4,000 videos to make them aware of who he is, not to mention has spent a lot of time looking for them, can be found, at least the most attractive of women should have their reproduction controlled by him. Think about the infrastructure that he needs to do that. Can he do it by himself? No. Certainly millions of women in America alone, perhaps if the number of attractive women is that high, cannot all be controlled effectively by one man. When we look at this thing, if women are breeding with criminals and the result, the output is more and more criminals, and then we take a vote. Let's vote on things. Criminals get the final say. And they push people around. And they harass them and run psyops on them. And they bully them. And they gang stalk them. And they cyberbully them. They group harass them. Group stalking. There's like 4 million cases of stalking each year. 1 million is group stalking according to the Justice Department statistics I've gone over in other videos. Certainly this is unacceptable. And certainly breeding is a part of it. What, were you raised in a barn? By a bitch? And why is this allowed to continue? Certainly there are sex cults and eugenic groups and biodemographists and social Darwinists and scientific racists working hard to control reproduction. There are political parties and so on. When I find myself being agitated, certainly I have to look at some of the causes. It starts off with a lack of proper nutrition. There are fillers and preservatives and unwanted substances in the food. And I'm not able to achieve my appropriate diet. And because I don't have a suitable helper, I don't get tasty food regularly. Water is contaminated. Contained. We've contained them, sir. We drugged them, right? Contaminated. Certainly, it's right there in the wordplay that this is part of what they do. Certainly, there's a reason why there's tamper-proof technologies on drinks. And certainly, there are ways to circumvent them that intelligence agencies take advantage of, especially when the corporations are part of the same privileged groups, political and otherwise, as they are. Even Trump has exposed messages that revealed that there was a secret society operating in the FBI. If one was to believe that they are limited to that, it is quite stupid. If one believed that martial arts has nothing to do with this one, that's where fencing comes from. Occultists work in geometry. It's where the best fencers in the history of the sport, and it is a sport, mind you, come from. Plato himself was said to be a wrestler and a noted one in his youth. Plato, one of the first examples of eugenics in Western culture, was Plato, I believe in his book, The Republic. I'm not saying the Republicans are all to blame for this. It is part of Western culture to have cults operating behind the scenes that are sponsored by corporations, and I've thoroughly explored this with Justinian and so on, as an example, and how it was first on record. Right? These are craftsmen and trades groups and so on, and they are absolutely concerned with orgies and reproduction. When we look at the woman, she has many orgasms. Okay, so if you're a woman and you're with a guy who can't please you, and I'll go as far as to say there's been times that I couldn't please a woman. You know, I was drugged up and, you know, on mind-controlled drugs and other instances. I'll go ahead and say it. You know, women, I come once, it takes me an hour to rejuvenate or whatever, you know, or however long, half an hour, whatever. Okay, an average person is the same thing. Okay, average man. And women have multiple orgasms. So when you're in a sex cult and you're a scum and you're a selfish me type of bitch with no respect for true order and love, what do? You have orgies. There you go. So also the romantic desires, sex versus love, fantasies. Why do guys have role-playing sex? They're trying to make sex more fulfilling. So sex by itself, on record, and irrefutably so, cannot be enough. You have to have fulfilling and meaningful sex, or sex that appeals to your nature, proclivities, tendencies, and desires. My rightful place and how that relates to my ability to fulfill my needs with meaningful substances, foods, women, meaningful ideas, people, places, and things, including my relationship with God, ancestors, and principles of good and righteousness. Covert drugging and their solution to it, which is psychiatry, which is nonsense. Abilify has a class action suit against them because of the reduced inhibitions. And think about tranquilizers, total sedation. Yes, after you've done this person so wrong and there's nothing wrong with him, he's brilliant, he's the top martial artist, and on and on and on. He's from, from his good stock, and on and on and on. According to their own Western scale, on top of that, minus the racism. Oh yeah, the right thing to do is to tranquilize them, to make them, put them in a coma with psych meds. It's stupid. Pestering. Obviously, jealous bitches, people who are hired to do so and otherwise, are pestering me. And this is just a few of the very straightforward reasons that come to mind. This middle of nowhere bitch shit, I've been limited to as a result of these things. These things create other problems, and some of them stick out more than others. Okay? Being limited, living in California where it's hot, having your parents financially sabotage and not having effective air conditioning, and so on, can affect you as well. Going out in public as a result of that, and being gang stalked, you go from being hot and sweaty to being gang stalked in public, right? It can have an effect. A lot of times when we're angry about something, our first inclination is to bully and punish. I'm no different. You see it in these videos. I'm not racist. My first inclination and reaction to racism is to be racist. But the long-term activities is the difference between what they refer to as reverse racism and racism, when it's compared to when one person who's racist, that's his culture, and the other person is reacting but has a martial arts code or some kind of code of morality. And the Bible seems to be sufficient when it comes to this issue. Then we see the refined scale, thought versus Haru. We should have some pre-existing scale with Haru on behalf of Ra, the Pharaoh on behalf of Ra judging, or someone that he has nominated to judge. So everyone is a slave to assist to the system to a certain degree. Which system is it? Are you a slave to God, as some of the prophets and quote-unquote freedom fighters and even terrorists have referred to themselves as? We see from all people from all walks of life see it that way. We are all slaves. We are all limited in behaviors one way or another. Laws limit behaviors one way or another. And even the people who operate in the deep state, their behaviors are limited to agreements and limit the natural limits of human behavior and so on. So should somebody without a heart make these decisions? Never should a woman with no heart reject a man who has one. This is unnatural. Okay? Minus it conflicting with the top martial artists' orders. So there's an order of heart. The top martial artist is on top, and that relates to passion and love, versus a woman who thinks of orgies. It is not just the scientist who refuses to stand in the divine order that is at odds with me. It is not just the guy who can't fight or the criminal, and so on. Okay? The little boy who wants to be free to have sex with other women. It is also the big strong guy who would make the argument that he can please a woman better because the more weight a man has, arguably, and at least at times, the more of a penis he has, and the smaller, the less he has, he has honed his senses, which might make it so he lasts longer. But then that's when the martial arts control comes into play. So some people are too mature to discuss this, and fine. Go cry with the rest of the bitches. Go hold a bitch's hat and say, "Oh my gosh, that's horrible. That's profane. That's perverse. That's perverted." Go whine like a bitch. This is real life. In case you haven't noticed, the sewer system isn't full of roses. This planet isn't all pure substances and pure angels who play in the harp. Okay? Life is grimy. I am the way to the light out of the floating toilet floating around the sun. I am the way out. Anyway, so as we look at this thing, we must see that my points are sound and irrefutable. We look at the slave trade, the Igbo slave trade, the Igbo relation to the Europeans. I guess the book's in the other room. Okay, we look at their own arguments about their own court system, conservative book, right? Out of order, out of order. The court system is out of order, right? We look at different explanations. Here's a white Jew, I believe, who wrote a book, Imbeciles, about eugenics, okay? Eugenics society, this is mainstream. Oh, here we go. The Igbo and the Europeans, you know, we see that in this book is thoroughly documented that there were witches, you know, criminals and other scum that were taken as slaves, not just some royal families, right? People were thrown in. It's kind of like psychiatry in prison. You have the good and the bad, right? Some decent people are thrown into prison, thrown into the psych ward, but some people are there who deserve it. And when you have the masses of scum and they breed willingly in an unnatural system, the product, the vast majority of the product you see from there, the people, are scum. That's how they've been produced. That's how they've been designed. That's how they've been reared. You see a bunch of witchcraft emerging from Haiti to New Orleans. We see witchcraft and hoodoo and voodoo and Wicca coming from nonsense. On record fraudulent lies is the foundation of Wicca. And that, of course, goes back to Y-Ka. Y-C-A-Y-C-Ka. Wicca was also spelled W-I-C-A and W-I-C-C-A. So going back to the, you know, I want you to remember this point. I'm not racist. I do think we are not equal. I do think there is an order. And I know that this is true. I'm a martial artist. To say all people are equal is like saying all martial artists are just as proficient as I am. It's fucking stupid. It's dumb. To not understand the differences would mean that I wouldn't be the top. I am the top because I understand, embrace, and I come from the continuity of understanding, overstanding, and truly comprehending the differences. It took wisdom to breed in the right direction to forge the top martial artist. Everything else is an inferior bloodline. You can start crying about it all you want, but these are the facts. You're very foolish if you say, well, someone from my race, it's someone from my... You're an idiot. It's Prince Harry. You know, what the fuck's wrong with you? We are all humans. And certainly, in a crony capitalist society with globalism, the most stigmatized race is most likely to be, you know, the ideal race. You know, these, you know, people aren't ruling because they have a high moral standard and everyone else is scum. It's the other way around. They even worship Saturn on the great seal of the dollar bill. Role reversal. So certainly, as we do our research, we wind up with the most educated group of Africans, right? The most intelligent group, which is the Igbos, right? We have a bunch of, you know, New York Times, The Guardian, different, I believe it was The Guardian, different publications have shown that that is the case. Okay, the Igbos are the most versatile. They adapted to the system in terms of intelligence, the best, and this is a very key and significant determinant when it comes to naturally forging the top martial arts. When you have, you know, a more educated, disciplined population as a sabotage, disenfranchised people from the most populated nation in Africa, the melting pot, the pressure cooker, etc. Certainly, it doesn't take a genius to figure out where to look for the top martial artist. And I've gone through a whole myriad of explanations and angles, and I've definitively shown it. So let's go back to the idea of Hugh. Hugh is authoritative utterance from the top martial arts. Hugh man, a man's authoritative utterance as a top martial arts, versus a science says, see, that's what I was getting at. You know, that's not exactly authoritative. That's unfocused and weird. That is unauthoritative, you know, nor is it, rah! Okay? It is, look, I am Farah. Ra, ka, ba, ka. There is a difference. Surgical strikes, people. Not barbarians, not scientific Satanism, but higher, divine, light contact that transfers into the master martial artist. Mass is Tor. Spirit, Sparit, Spirit. We have spared your kind for quite some time. The end is coming, I'm sure.